Today, our title is to refresh our heart. Refresh your heart by dealing with your anger. We're going to talk about anger, all right? Something all of you love, right? Okay? All right, well, we'll deal with it. Anger is a cancer that'll eat us up. That's the truth of it. And we all know that angry person that has no joy, right? When I was growing up, it was our neighbor, the guy right next door to us. He was just so angry. This guy would never smile. If you wave at him, he wouldn't wave. Just a scour on his face. His poor wife just looked miserable all the time. And if ever we were out in the street playing ball and the ball rolled in his yard, if we just reach over to pick it up, he'd come running out just cursing. I mean, he's so angry. And it all just exploded one day whenever he cursed out my sister. It wasn't me, my dad. Now, talk about people on two different extremes. My dad was the godliest man I've ever seen. I was very blessed. I grew up in a home where my dad loved Jesus. But he messed with his daughter that day. And so my dad went over. They had some words. And I think they came to an agreement. But it kind of ended that day, and he just kind of ignored us from then on. But that happens sometimes, right? There's angry people in our lives. And maybe even for us, it's us on an occasion or two along the way. Well, Jesus spends an entire section in the Sermon on the Mount talking about this anger thing. And you ever wonder why? Well, the reason why is there's not anyone here today in person or watching online down at ECI that doesn't struggle with anger occasionally. And that's probably the reason that Jesus gave so much attention to anger. And we find it in other passages of Scripture as well. Jesus knew everyone in his audience then and now that we struggle with anger. So here's a question. What's the one thing that sets you off, that sets off your anger the quickest, all right? Don't say it out loud, all right? Might embarrass yourself. You might offend the person next to you, all right? Someone already did that in the first service, all right? I have a couple. I'll just be honest. I'll be the guinea pig, all right? I'll throw myself out there. I told some of the guys in my fireside group earlier this week that I was going to make sure I didn't drive this week before I got up and spoke on anger, all right? And because anger can happen when you're driving in South Florida, all right? Let me just say this. If you drive slow, please stay in the far right lane, okay? There's a lane for you. It's got your name on. If you look, you'll see your name on it. It says, come on over here. Be slow. Enjoy your day. Get out of the way. You know, just that kind of thing. If you do change lanes, speed up when you change lanes. Don't slam on your brakes. That's called cutting people off. You just kind of move over and speed up, get in the flow. It works really well. People wave, they'll smile, give you a thumbs up. Don't use your flashers in the rain. It's against the law. Turn your headlights on. Okay, there's a little book, and they tell you all about that kind of stuff, all right? Now, we can go on and on, right? When you're at a red light, okay, when it turns green, go. Put your phone down. Oh, all right, several of us, right? I know I have some anger driving issues. If you see my wife, do not tell her I said that, all right? Because that can be a source of conflict here and there. She's usually right. Don't tell her I said that either, all right? Another thing that just upsets me is injustice. Or people taking advantage of others, especially those that can't take care of themselves. And that makes me angry. And it's not always bad to be angry, okay? And we'll talk about that, but it's how we deal with that. So here's a question for you, and there's a blank in your notes. What are your anger issues? Write down your answer there, okay? And you don't have to show anybody else. Maybe this will help you. Maybe some of you immediately, you're like, I know what it is, and you put it down. Well, here's the great news. Jesus has some answers for our anger. He's got answers for us. And we're in week 2 of our teaching series called ReFresh, and we're highlighting some of the big ideas that Jesus covered in this longest teaching he ever did, and it's called the Sermon on the Mount. And today, again, we're talking about refresh your heart by dealing with your anger. So let's look at one of the strongest negative emotions we all have, which is anger. So ask another question. How many of you have ever been angry? Raise your hand, all right? Ever been angry, okay? If someone didn't raise their hand, watch out, okay? The truth is, I assume all of us raised our hand, and if you did, first, thanks for being honest. You're part of all of us. But secondly, this message is for you. And so today we're going to talk about how we need to ask Jesus to refresh our hearts and to cleanse us and to help us with that anger issue that we have. So there's 3 big ideas, and let me encourage you to take notes. We handed you out a little piece of paper. You can fill in the blanks there. Here's the first one. Number 1, realize anger is a universal condition. It's a universal condition. Here's what we mean by that. Everybody you know struggles with anger. For some of us, the struggle's obvious. I mean, it's like we're always mad. And you know those kind of people. That was my neighbor. It's like they have a neon sign on their head and it just says angry, you know. And you've seen those kind of, you walk in somewhere, and my wife and I were at a restaurant recently, and the gentleman that was taking care of us and others, he was just angry. And we got along with him okay because we made the effort, but there were 2 ladies, and he was just a little tough. But it was just like angry right on his forehead. And some of us, it's very obvious. And for others, we kind of keep it hidden. And we never let the storm out. But here's the problem. It will come out at some point if we don't deal with it. We see it all around us. People blow up into a rage over the smallest things. And at times it can be scary. It can be frightening. So let's look at what Jesus had to say about anger in Matthew chapter 5. We're going to look at verse 21. It says this, you have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. And if you call someone an idiot, those of us that drive, okay. It says you're in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. Jesus is pretty strong on this thing. But look at the way that Jesus teaches, just a master teacher. He starts by saying, here's something everybody agrees on. If you murder someone, you're in trouble. All right? It's in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament. I mean, and everybody's like going, yeah, we agree with that. But then he comes back to the root. And he goes, you know what? If you're angry with someone, you're subject to judgment. Because it starts somewhere. And when it starts there, it progresses. And then he goes on, if you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought before the court. And in those times, you could be brought before the Sanhedrin for calling someone a name. And then he goes on beyond that, and he says, if you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. Why? Because Jesus is not a part of you. If that's your progression, you're taking it all the way to that point of murder. And so Jesus deals with it very specifically, going back to the root. Look at verse 23. He says, so if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. You can't be involved in worship if you are dealing with that anger and that hatred and the bitterness with other people. Anger was a big deal to Jesus because he knew it could derail us from what God had for us. And if you want to miss opportunities, be an angry person. You're going to miss some opportunities. When I went to college, I was a freshman. I was all excited about being there. And, you get checked in and everything. And I go to my room. I'm going to find my roommate there. They had put an upperclassman in my room. He was supposed to be kind of a mentor for me. And he was one of the angriest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, he was okay when I met him, but he worked at a grocery store. And so 4 or 5 nights a week, he would come back from work at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and as soon as he'd come in, he'd flick the light on, he'd slam the door, he'd start throwing stuff across the room, yelling, cursing, carrying on. It was just horrible. And I mean, eventually I'm going, bro, you got to slow down. I mean, this isn't going to work. And it just got worse and worse. So finally, I went to the dean of students, and I just told him, I said, hey, one of us is going to have to be moved, or we're going to deal with it in the room. It just got to that point. And if you're around angry people, you will become angry, either at them or with them. It's just the way that it spreads. So they moved my roommate to a different room. I mean, later we became friends, which was good. But those things, they cause us to miss opportunities, and they mess us up. Here's the second thing. Write this down. Recognize the results of anger. Recognize the results of anger. The problem is not the anger that we feel. Sometimes your anger is justified. All right? The problem is the things that we do when we are angry. It's where we take it to. I was ready to fight my roommate, and I think I could have taken him, all right? But I was ready to go at it. But thankfully, there was a solution. So being angry, write this in your notes. Being angry is not a sin. It's not a sin to get angry because it's going to happen. And sometimes there are things that are justified in your anger. But acting out in anger is a sin. When you act out on it, that's where the sin comes in. Me being angry at my roommate wasn't a sin. I think I had the right to be. And I mean, it got out of hand. But me acting out on it would have been. And fortunately, I sought out some help. And we got some help before it got there. I wish that was true in all my anger situations. But check out what Paul, one of the apostles, said. Wrote more scripture than anyone in the Bible. And look at what he says in Ephesians 4:26. He says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Give no opportunity to the devil. He says, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to act out on it. It's not okay to live in it. That's the thing that's important. There's so much in these verses that Paul shares with us. Just a small passage, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to act in anger. Because when we act in anger, for some of us, we lose control. That means we can't control what we're doing because that anger is flared up so much. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to live in anger. You can't stay there. Because when you live in anger, it's going to not just mess up your life, but even those around you. And when we carry today's anger into tomorrow, we start tomorrow mad, and then our anger just grows. It grows until it's out of control. It grows until it leads to an opportunity for the evil one. It grows until it leads us to do something wrong, something we're going to regret. The evil one uses our anger to do evil things. You may not have started in a bad way, but you'll end up in a bad way. That's what anger does. So if you carry unresolved anger all the time, you're going to do something stupid. That's just the way it is. Some of us, we could give examples in our lives. You're going to do or say something that you're going to regret. You're going to act out or you're going to shout out in anger. So let's go back to what Jesus said. According to Jesus, you can fill in some blanks here, unresolved anger can lead to a critical spirit. People who are angry and they let that anger live in them, they become critical people. And it's like because that anger's inside of you, you're going to start finding something wrong with everything. You're going to become critical. And the reason why is because there's something festering in you that's got to come out, and it's going to start coming out. You'll get a critical spirit. Unresolved anger can lead to name calling. We just read about that. The word for idiot that's placed there, it comes from an Armenian team. The Greek used it, it's called raka, and it means empty-headed. And it means someone who is an idiot or someone who we would call stupid. And we start calling people those things, and it even gets worse. You know that how that works. Unresolved anger can lead to hurting others because it's not just in the name calling. The name calling hurts. I mean, I've seen people just let the anger build up to where they explode with their children. They call them names and they're abusive to them. And it leads to hurting others. And unresolved anger can even lead to physical violence. And sad to say, we've seen that in our culture. Jesus specifically mentions all of those as the result of unresolved anger. Some of us, we get critical. Some of us, we start name calling. We hurt others. We get physically violent when we're angry. And how many of us wish that we could have those angry moments back? Sure we do. It's embarrassing. We've all had the experience of boiling something over on the stove, right? If you cook, okay? You ever done that? All right. I remember the first time that my wife and I cooked lobster. We went up to Boston area to visit some friends, and when we came back, we bought a big old lobster. They put it in a cooler and packed it with ice. We took it on the plane. We come home, and so we put a big pot on the stove, and we got a lot of boiling water in there, and we put the lobster in. That little squeaky noise. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, we put it in there, and it's boiling, and then all of a sudden, it just starts boiling over. And I mean, the water's going everywhere. That lobster juice was getting on the stove, and it was like sizzling, and we go to move it, and it's popping on our arms, and it's burning us. It smells bad. I mean, the whole house is just stinking up like the bad part of the ocean. You know what I mean? And that's what happens. And the same thing's true with unresolved anger. When it boils over, it burns everyone it touches. It makes a mess. It stinks. And you got to clean it up. Because if you don't, you're just going to smell bad for a long time. That's the reality of it, right? Unresolved anger will eat your lunch. Write that down. It's an old term. And basically what it means is it's going to take something away from you. It's taking away your lunch. It's taking away what you need. And that's what unresolved anger does, is it's going to take away from you. People who are angry and they live in it, they miss out on so much. They miss out on all the things that God wants to do in their lives. Unresolved anger is a cancer in your soul. It just stirs there. It eats you up. And it's always present, and it can just explode at any moment. Here's the sad part. Unresolved anger will spill out on those you love. If we hold it in and we don't deal with it, it's going to explode at some point. When I'm constantly angry, I can't enjoy life. When I'm constantly angry, I can't enjoy relationships. And think about the people in your life who are constantly mad, who are angry all the time. It's like they were born mad and it just gets worse. They don't have joy. So angry people don't have joy. They only have anger. It'll eat your lunch. One of the problems with unresolved anger is that it's going to come out. And when it does, it's usually explosive. It's usually a big deal. Those are the people that we see going nuts, right? In road rage. You've seen those things. Sporting events. You see people just fighting over ridiculous things. On social media, we see it all the time. Here's one. Politics. Crazy, isn't it? I mean, I can tell you who we need to vote for. Jesus. That's the answer. And if that's where our country was, it'd be different than it is now. We need to pray for that. But another problem with this unresolved anger is that we usually explode on those that are closest to us. It's the people that we love the most that take the brunt of it. And this is where we see families and friends walk away from each other. And it's been true in our lives or people around us. We've seen it. Where family members, they don't even talk anymore. It breaks your heart. Friends, they've been friends for a lifetime. They just walk away. Unresolved anger has a progression to it. And I want you to write this down because this will help us with some of our issues with anger. Here's the first thing. Unresolved anger will lead to bitterness. If you've got anger in your life and you're not dealing with it, you're going to become a bitter person. And bitter people are no fun to be around. Because they're critical. They're critical of everything, of every person. No matter what's going on, they've got this little snide remark. And here's the next one. Bitterness leads to loneliness. If you're a bitter person, you're going to end up lonely because nobody wants to be around you. They don't, because you're angry. No matter how much they love you and care about you, they don't want to be around you because you're bitter. You're angry, and it leads to bitterness. And then loneliness leads to isolation. Again, because no one wants to be around that person who's bitter. You're not just going to be lonely, you're going to be by yourself. So no one can be around you. And then here's the sad part. Isolation leads to depression and desperation. Depression and desperation. And the sad part is that nobody wants to be around you, but the reason why is because you are so bitter and you're so isolated that now you're depressed, and it leads to desperation. This is where people act out, and we see this violence and other things occur. And it's horrendous. But here's the good news. There's answers. And if that's you, you need to get some help. And the first place to go for help is to Jesus. You reach out to Jesus. And if you're here today and that's something you've never done, we want to help with that. End of the service, Pastor Johnny, Carson, they'll tell you how you can let us know. We'll be glad to meet with you today or talk with you sometime about how you can have Jesus in your life. That's the greatest decision you'll ever make. But then there's another thing. You probably need to see a counselor. And that's good. It's okay to see a counselor. I would say see a Christian counselor. And the reason why is because the things that they share with you and help you with are going to come from God's Word. They're going to be praying with you and dealing with it from God's perspective. There's nothing wrong with that. I want you to hear that. Pastor Johnny's office used to be across the hall from me. And probably once a week or so, Pastor Johnny would just come kind of walking slow into my office, talking about how great Oklahoma's football team was and other lies. And no, I'm kidding, all right? We both respect each other's team. He knows University of Miami's better. And, all right, see? But he'd come into my office, and probably an hour, hour and a half later, we just kind of end that conversation. He'd kind of mosey on out real nice and slow. And when he'd walk out, I'd go, I think I just had a counseling session, And it was. And he just kind of knew when I needed to talk, when I needed to get some things out. Man, what a help. And it's important. So reach out to Jesus, see a counselor. Here's a quick review. Number one, realize anger is a universal emotion. Everybody deals with it. Number two, recognize the results of anger. Unresolved anger, it'll eat your lunch. It'll mess you up. And then here's number three. Radically uproot your anger. Uproot. That means you pull it out by the roots. You ever pull weeds and you don't get the roots? It comes back, right? Same thing's true with our anger. If we don't get down in it and uproot it, it's going to come back. We have to deal with it. So how big of a deal is anger? It's big. Because staying angry means I'm going to act out in anger. Because acting out in anger means that I'm going to hurt those that are closest to me. Being angry is going to take away the opportunities that I have to even share Jesus with others. Nobody wants to hear about Jesus if you're angry. They don't. How many of you ever sat under an angry preacher? I have. It's rough, isn't it? That's why I'm not angry today. Good. All right. So, because being angry with people affects my ability to worship God. It affects my ability to worship God, and so I have to uproot that anger. We've got to do something about it. Verse 23 in Matthew 5, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Anger is going to affect your worship if it's real in your life and if it's still festering. My anger with people will affect my relationship with God. It's going to happen. If I stay angry with others long enough, I eventually will be angry with God. It's going to happen. Because we're going to have to blame someone. We blame others, and then we're going to blame God. Anger is like a cancer. It metastasizes and it spreads. It'll eat up anything that it touches. It'll consume you. It'll consume the people around you. You ever notice how you can be angry with someone or something, and then you take it out on those you are not angry with? It's because it metastasizes and it spreads. Ever notice how you can be angry or hurt by a friend, and it begins to affect your other relationships and friendships? It's because it metastasizes and it spreads. You ever notice how you can be hurt by one pastor or one church, and it begins to affect how you feel about all pastors and churches? It's true. Because it metastasizes and it spreads. This is why Jesus tells us if we're angry with someone, then we must deal with it before we can fully worship God. My anger with others, my horizontal anger, it'll affect my vertical relationship with God. I don't like it, but it's true. So we have to radically uproot our anger. So when you realize that you're angry with someone or something, or there's anger in you, you got to identify why you're angry. You got to find out why. You got to discern whether it's your issue or if it's something someone else did to you. So you got to understand it's there. You got to discern it. You got to deal with it. You've got to find a way to release it. And then if you're still angry or someone is angry with you, you got to sit down with that person and work through it. You have to realize where you're angry. That's what we're saying. Realize where you're angry at. Then you got to recognize the results of your anger. What's it doing? What's it doing to you? What it's doing to others? Then you have to radically uproot that anger. So I want to give you 4 things as we're closing today that'll help you with that uprooting. Here's the first thing. Some of us, we need to own it. It's our fault. I mean, we're just getting honest now, okay? Some of us, the reason we have anger in our life is because of something we did, or it's because of how we feel, or it's because we have chosen not to deal with that. We've chosen not to uproot it. And whatever that is, maybe we need to say, I'm wrong. Maybe we need to say, I'm sorry, or forgive me. But we have to own it. We've got to take responsibility for our part. And then some of us, we need to forgive. This is a tough one. We need to forgive. We need to forgive those who hurt us or who created anger in us. And we've got to let it go somehow. We got to walk away from the prison of others. Let me explain that. Whenever you have anger and bitterness towards someone who has hurt you, who has damaged you, who has caused pain, who has abused you, if you don't let it go, you're going to live in their prison because it's going to keep eating up inside of you. And it's not always easy, but you've got to forgive them so you can walk away. I didn't say you have to forget, and I didn't say you have to trust them. You got to forgive them. Maybe you never talk to them again. And that might be the best thing. Here's the neat thing. We can get some help with that. So some of us need to forgive. Here's the third thing. Some, or really all of us, we need to give it to Jesus. Got to give it to Jesus. And here's the first thing you do in giving it to Jesus. You confess. If it's your fault, you go to Jesus. You say, I'm the one who messed up. It's my fault. I own it. And I want to give it to you. And you let Jesus take that sin as far as the east is from the west, the Bible says, to the deepest part of the ocean. He forgives us. He cleans us up. Isn't that amazing? So we confess, then we release it, we let him have it, and then we worship. Because now we can sit down and really worship our Father. It changes everything. When your relationship with God is where it needs to be, your relationships with others will be where they need to be. Think about that. What an awesome promise that is for us, and a release that God will not just bless us with him, but he'll bless us with others. And then here's the fourth thing, all right? We need to own it, need to forgive, we need to give it to Jesus. And some of us, we need to get some help. We can't do it on our own. It's okay. Welcome to us, okay? Sometimes we need help. And you got to go see a counselor, a Christian counselor, and let them work with you on how to resolve that anger, how to uproot that anger, how to deal with it. So here's our question. Which of those is God saying to you today? What do you need to do? And what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to own it? Are you going to forgive? Are you going to give it to Jesus? Get some help? I hope God will lead you to take those steps you need to, because Jesus has answers for our anger.